The mahogany casket gleamed under the cathedral's stained glass windows as mourners filed past, their faces etched with practiced sorrow. Richard Blackwell stood at the front, his designer black suit impeccable, his expression appropriately grief-stricken. But the moment he stepped outside the funeral home's heavy oak doors, his mask slipped. His phone buzzed. One glance at the screen made his lips curve into the first genuine smile he'd worn all day. "Vanessa," he whispered, pressing the device to his ear as he walked toward his black Mercedes. "Baby, is it over? Are you free?" Her voice was honey-sweet through the speaker, tinged with excitement that made his pulse quicken. Richard glanced back at the funeral home where his wife of 10 years lay in her casket, surrounded by flowers and the tears of people who truly loved her. "She's finally gone," he breathed, his voice thick with relief rather than grief. "The insurance money will clear in 30 days. We can finally be together." A small gasp made him freeze. 20 feet away, partially hidden behind a magnolia tree, stood 8-year-old Destiny Carter Blackwell. Her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, were wide with shock and pain. The little girl clutched a single white rose she'd planned to place on her mother's casket. Their eyes met across the distance, and Richard's blood turned to ice. His stepdaughter had heard everything. "Daddy Richard?" Destiny's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through him like a blade. "Mama's not really gone, is she?" The phone slipped from his suddenly numb fingers, clattering against the pavement as Vanessa's voice continued to chatter excitedly from the speaker. "I can't wait to move into that mansion, Richard. We'll finally have everything we wanted." Destiny took a step backward, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You wanted Mama to die?" Richard's world tilted on its axis. Everything he'd carefully planned, everything he'd worked toward, suddenly hung in the balance because of one little girl who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what Richard didn't know, what no one except 2 people in the entire world knew, was that Simone Carter Blackwell wasn't dead at all. 6 months earlier, Simone Carter Blackwell had been living what appeared to be a charmed life. Her tech company, Soltech Innovations, had revolutionized community-based social platforms, making her one of the youngest black billionaires in America. Her marriage to Richard seemed solid, and her daughter Destiny was the light of her life. But cracks had been showing for months. "Mrs. Blackwell, your test results are concerning," Dr. Elena Rodriguez had said during what should have been a routine checkup. "Your blood work shows traces of digitalis, foxglove poison. Small amounts, administered over time." Simone's hands had trembled as she processed the words. "Someone is poisoning me?" Dr. Rodriguez nodded grimly. "The symptoms you've been experiencing, the fatigue, heart palpitations, nausea, they're all consistent with gradual digitalis poisoning. Whoever is doing this wants it to look like natural heart failure." The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. Richard's insistence that she update her will. His sudden interest in her business affairs. The way he'd started bringing her morning coffee in bed. Something he'd never done in 10 years of marriage. "What can we do?" Simone had whispered. "We can save your life," Dr. Rodriguez said firmly. "But it's going to require trust and tremendous courage." Now, as Simone watched her own funeral through a live stream on an untraceable phone, she felt her heart breaking for an entirely different reason. Her baby girl stood there, small and lost, discovering the man she'd called daddy for 3 years was a monster. "The hardest part is watching Destiny suffer," Simone said to Dr. Rodriguez, who sat beside her in the small safe house apartment they'd secured. "But if we tried to expose Richard without proof, he would have killed us both." Dr. Rodriguez squeezed her hand. "The plan is working, Simone. He thinks you're dead. He's getting sloppy confident. Soon we'll have everything we need." Through the phone screen, Simone watched as her grandmother Ruby Carter stepped forward to comfort Destiny. Even at 72, Grandma Ruby was a force of nature, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her spine straight with dignity. "Come here, baby girl," Ruby murmured, gathering Destiny into her arms. "Grandma's got you." Simone pressed her hand to the screen, wishing she could hold them both. "Soon," she whispered. "I'll come home soon." But first she had to gather enough evidence to ensure Richard would never hurt anyone again. 2 weeks after the funeral, Richard sat in the mahogany-paneled office of Patterson, Hayes and Associates, drumming his fingers impatiently on the leather armrest of his chair. Across from him, elderly attorney Harold Patterson shuffled through papers with maddening deliberation. "The will is quite straightforward, Mr. Blackwell," Patterson said finally. "Mrs. Carter Blackwell left everything to her daughter, Destiny, with you as trustee until she reaches 18. Richard's jaw clenched. "Everything?" "Soltech Innovations, the mansion, all investments and properties. The total estate is valued at approximately $2.3 billion. Patterson peered over his glasses. Of course, as trustee, you'll receive a generous annual stipend for Destiny's care, $500,000 per year. $500,000? Richard's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. That's nothing compared to what Simone was worth. Perhaps, Patterson said mildly, but those were her wishes. She was quite specific about protecting her daughter's inheritance. After leaving the lawyer's office, Richard immediately called Vanessa. There's been a complication, he said through gritted teeth. Meanwhile, across town, Grandma Ruby sat at her kitchen table with Detective James Harper, a tall, patient man with kind eyes who'd been recommended by a friend. Destiny played quietly in the corner, but Ruby could see the little girl's ears perk up whenever Richard's name was mentioned. Something isn't right about this whole situation, Ruby told the detective. Simone was healthy as a horse, and suddenly she dies of heart failure at 35? And that man. She shook her head. He's not grieving. He's celebrating. Detective Harper made notes in his small pad. What makes you say that? He's already moved that woman into the house. That influencer girl with the fake everything. Claims she's there to help with Destiny, but that child comes to me crying every night. Has Destiny said anything specific? Ruby glanced at her great-granddaughter, then lowered her voice. She heard something at the funeral. About insurance money and being free. The child's been having nightmares ever since. Detective Harper closed his notepad. Mrs. Carter, I'll be honest with you, without solid evidence, there's not much I can do. But if you notice anything else suspicious, anything at all, you call me immediately. After he left, Ruby held Destiny close on the porch swing they'd shared so many evenings with Simone. Grandma Ruby, Destiny whispered, do you think Mama can see us from heaven? Ruby's heart ached as she smoothed the little girl's hair. I think your mama is watching over you every second, baby girl. And I think she'd want you to be brave and tell the truth when the time comes. What neither of them knew was that Simone was indeed watching. From a carefully hidden camera system Dr. Rodriguez had helped her install months before her staged death. Vanessa Price swept into the Blackwell mansion like she owned the place, her designer heels clicking against the marble floors that Simone had chosen with such care. Everything about her was perfectly curated for social media. The platinum blonde extensions, the surgically enhanced curves, the pouty lips that never seemed to close completely. This is all going to have to go, she announced to Richard, gesturing dismissively at Simone's family photos that still lined the hallway. It's so depressing having a dead woman staring at us from every wall. Destiny, who'd been quietly doing homework at the kitchen island, looked up with tears in her eyes. Those are pictures of my mama. Vanessa barely glanced at the child. Well, your mama's gone now, sweetie. Time to move on. She turned to Richard with a bright smile. Baby, when can we start redecorating? I have so many ideas. Soon, Richard said, though his jaw was tight with frustration. The will had been a devastating blow to his plans. We need to be careful about appearances. Appearances? Vanessa pouted. Richard, we've been sneaking around for 2 years. I want to be your wife, not your dirty little secret. From her hidden vantage point across town, Simone watched the live feed from her home security cameras, her hands clenched into fists. Seeing another woman in her house was painful, but watching that woman dismiss her daughter like she was nothing was unbearable. I'm going to destroy them both, Simone whispered to Dr. Rodriguez, who was reviewing financial documents at the small kitchen table. Patience, the doctor cautioned. We need more evidence. Right now we have suspicion and a recorded phone call. We need proof of the poisoning, proof of motive, and proof of intent. On the screen, they watched as Vanessa continued her tour of the house, criticizing everything Simone had built and chosen. But it was what happened next that made Simone's blood run cold. Vanessa knelt down to Destiny's eye level, her fake smile plastered in place. Listen, little girl, I know this is hard for you. But your daddy and I are going to take really good care of you. All you have to do is be a good girl and do what we say. You're not my mama, Destiny said quietly. Vanessa's smile faltered for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. No, I'm not. But I'm going to be your new mama soon, whether you like it or not. So you better start getting used to it. The threat in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. Richard, who'd been on a business call, missed the entire exchange. Simone was already reaching for her phone when it rang in her hands. Grandma Ruby? Baby girl, you need to come get this child. Ruby's voice was tight with worry. I don't care what kind of plan you got running, Destiny needs her mama. That woman is up to no good, and your husband. Ruby's voice cracked. He's not the man we thought he was. What happened? Destiny called me crying. Said the blonde woman told her she better start remembering who pays for her food and clothes if she wants to keep living in that house. What kind of person talks to an 8-year-old like that? Simone closed her eyes, fighting every maternal instinct screaming at her to run to her daughter immediately. A few more days, Grandma Ruby? I promise. Just a few more days. But as she watched Vanessa's true nature emerge on the camera feed, Simone wondered if her daughter could survive that long. 3 days later, Destiny sat in her bedroom at Grandma Ruby's house, carefully drawing in the notebook her great-grandmother had given her. Her small hands moved with surprising precision as she sketched the scene she'd witnessed at her mother's funeral. Richard on the phone, his face twisted with satisfaction instead of grief. What are you working on, baby girl? Ruby asked, settling her considerable frame onto the small bed. I'm drawing what I saw, Destiny said quietly. So I don't forget. Ruby studied the drawing with growing amazement. The child had captured not just the scene, but the emotion, Richard's cruel smile, the phone pressed to his ear, even small details like his expensive watch and the way he'd glanced around to make sure no one was watching. Destiny, honey, this is very good. Very detailed. Ruby kept her voice calm, but her heart was racing. Do you remember what Daddy Richard said on the phone? The little girl nodded solemnly. He said Mama was finally gone and something about insurance money. And the lady on the phone was happy about living in our house. She looked up at Ruby with those wise eyes that seemed too old for her face. Grandma Ruby, does that mean he wanted Mama to die? Ruby gathered her great-granddaughter close, her own eyes filling with tears. Baby, some people do bad things for money. But you did nothing wrong, and your mama loved you more than anything in this world. I miss her so much it makes my tummy hurt. I know, sweetheart. I know. That evening, after Destiny had fallen asleep, Ruby called Detective Harper. I need to show you something, she said. And I think you need to talk to my great-granddaughter. The next morning, Detective Harper sat across from Destiny at Ruby's kitchen table, a gentle smile on his weathered face. I hear you're quite an artist, Miss Destiny. She nodded shyly, sliding her notebook across the table. Harper's eyebrows rose as he studied the detailed drawings. Not just the funeral scene, but others too. Richard bringing her mother coffee in bed every morning. Vanessa visiting when Destiny was supposed to be at school. Phone conversations overheard through closed doors. Destiny, these drawings tell a story, Harper said carefully. Can you tell me about this one? She pointed to a sketch of Richard and a woman in the kitchen. That's when I was supposed to be sleeping, but I got scared of the thunder. Daddy Richard was showing that lady papers and saying something about how much money Mama had. Harper made notes, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. When was this, sweetheart? Before Mama got sick. Maybe 2 months before. The detective exchanged glances with Ruby. A child's testimony could be powerful, but they needed more than drawings and overheard conversations. Miss Destiny, would you be brave enough to tell these stories to a judge someday? To help make sure justice is done. The 8-year-old straightened her shoulders with a dignity that reminded Harper of her great-grandmother. If it helps catch the person who hurt my mama, yes sir. I'll tell the truth. After Harper left, Ruby held Destiny close and whispered a prayer for strength. Neither of them knew that across town, Simone had been watching their every move, her heart swelling with pride at her daughter's courage. The plan was working, but the hardest part was yet to come. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been collecting evidence for months, but it was the hair sample from Simone's brush that provided the breakthrough they needed. In her private lab she ran test after test, documenting the gradual buildup of digitalis in Simone's system over a 6-month period. It's all here, she told Simone as they reviewed the results in their safe house. The poisoning pattern, the calculated dosages designed to mimic heart failure, even the timeline that corresponds with when Richard started bringing you morning coffee. Simone studied the charts, her anger building with each piece of evidence. He was killing me slowly for months. How did I not see it? Because you trusted him. Because you loved him. Dr. Rodriguez's voice was gentle but firm. That's what makes you human, Simone. That's what makes him a monster. Meanwhile, Detective Harper was building his own case. Financial records showed that Richard had been meeting with insurance investigators, pushing for a quick payout on Simone's life insurance policy. Credit card statements revealed expensive gifts purchased for Vanessa during the months when Simone was slowly declining. But the piece that tied everything together came from an unexpected source. Sarah Mitchell, Simone's best friend and business partner, had been quietly conducting her own investigation. As a corporate lawyer, she had access to resources that even the police couldn't easily obtain. "I found something," Sarah said when she met Harper at a downtown coffee shop. She slid a thick folder across the table. "Richard's been trying to gain control of Soltech through a series of shell companies. He's been setting up this takeover for over a year." Harper opened the folder, his expression growing darker as he read. "This shows premeditation. He wasn't just planning to kill his wife, he was planning to steal her company." "There's more," Sarah continued. "I've been monitoring Soltech's systems since Simone's death, and someone's been trying to access her private files. Trying to transfer patents and proprietary technology to companies that trace back to Richard." "Can you prove it?" Sarah smiled grimly. "I've got digital fingerprints, timestamps, and IP addresses." Richard's been so focused on the insurance money, he forgot that stealing a tech company leaves an electronic trail. Across town, Richard was growing increasingly frustrated with his limited access to Simone's fortune. The $500,000 trustee stipend felt like an insult, and Vanessa's constant demands for expensive jewelry and clothes were draining his personal accounts. "I don't understand why everything has to be so complicated," Vanessa complained as she lounged by the pool in a designer bikini that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "You said once she was gone we'd have everything." "It's that damn will," Richard muttered, pacing the length of the patio. "She must have suspected something." "Well, can't you just change it? You're the kid's guardian now." Richard stopped pacing, a cold smile spreading across his face. "Actually, there might be a way. If something happened to Destiny." Vanessa sat up, suddenly interested. "What do you mean?" "Accidents happen all the time. Especially to children who don't have anyone looking out for them." Neither of them noticed the small figure pressed against the upstairs window, listening to every word. Destiny's hands shook as she grabbed her notebook and began sketching frantically, tears streaming down her face as she drew the scene that would soon help put her stepfather behind bars forever. The plan that Dr. Rodriguez and Simone had crafted was elegant in its simplicity, but it required perfect timing and nerves of steel. They would use Richard's greed and impatience against him, creating a situation where he would reveal himself completely. "We need him to confess," Simone explained to Detective Harper during a clandestine meeting in the hospital parking garage. She wore a wig and sunglasses, but Harper could see the determination blazing in her eyes. "A recorded confession that can't be dismissed or explained away." "Mrs. Blackwell, what you're suggesting is incredibly dangerous," Harper said. "If Richard discovers you're alive, he'll try to finish what he started," Simone finished. "I know. But my daughter is in that house with a man who's already talking about having accidents happen to children. I won't let him hurt her." The trap they devised was multifaceted. Sarah Mitchell would approach Richard with a fake offer to buy Soltech, claiming to represent overseas investors who wanted to acquire the company quickly and quietly. The offer would be substantial enough to make Richard desperate to find a way around Destiny's inheritance. Meanwhile, Dr. Rodriguez would anonymously tip off the insurance company about irregularities in Simone's medical records, forcing them to delay the life insurance payout pending investigation. "The pressure will make him reckless," Simone said. "And when people are reckless, they make mistakes." Phase 1 worked perfectly. When Sarah approached Richard with the Soltech acquisition offer, his eyes lit up with greed. "How much are we talking about?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. $1.8 billion cash for complete ownership transfer," Sarah said smoothly. "But it has to be clean, no complications with inheritance or estate issues." Richard's mind raced. The offer was less than the company's full value, but it was immediate cash. "There might be some complications. The company officially belongs to my stepdaughter now." "How old is the child?" 8. Sarah pretended to consider this. "That could work. 8-year-olds can't exactly run tech companies, can they? Tragic accidents happen all the time." "Very sad, but it would clear up the ownership issues completely." The way Richard's face lit up at her words made Sarah's stomach turn, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "Of course, any such tragedy would need to appear completely accidental." "Of course," Richard agreed quickly. "When could we move forward?" "Give me 2 weeks to arrange the financing. In the meantime, you should probably start thinking about how to simplify the ownership situation." Phase 2 kicked in the next day when the insurance company called to inform Richard that his wife's life insurance claim was being delayed pending a full investigation. Investigation? Richard's voice was sharp with panic. "What kind of investigation?" "Routine procedure for policies this large, Mr. Blackwell. We need to review medical records, interview family members, that sort of thing." Nothing to worry about if everything was above board. By that evening, Richard was pacing the mansion like a caged animal. Vanessa watched him with growing concern, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wine glass. "Baby, you're making me nervous," she said. "What's wrong?" Richard stopped pacing and looked at her with cold calculation. "We need to accelerate our timeline." "What timeline?" "The one where that little brat stops standing between us and $2 billion. From her hidden surveillance point, Simone watched her husband plan her daughter's murder with ice in her veins and fire in her heart. Soon, very soon, it would be time to rise from the dead and claim her justice. The setup was almost too easy, which should have been Richard's first warning. 3 days after Sarah's offer, he received a text from an unknown number. "If you're serious about clearing up your inheritance problem, meet me at Riverside Park, 11 p.m. Come alone." Richard's hands trembled as he read the message. Someone was offering to help him eliminate destiny, and his first thought wasn't horror. It was relief. He showed up at the deserted park just before 11, his expensive shoes crunching on autumn leaves. A figure emerged from behind the pavilion, tall, wearing a dark hoodie with the face hidden in shadow. "You came," the figure said in a disguised voice. "Good. That means you're serious." "Who are you?" Richard demanded, though he kept his voice low. "Someone who understands that children can be inconvenient. I hear you have a problem that needs solving." Richard's heart pounded. What kind of solving? The permanent kind. Car accidents are very believable for children. Or maybe something that looks like a kidnapping gone wrong. The figure stepped closer. "For the right price, I can make your problem disappear forever." "How much?" The words came out before Richard could stop them. $500,000. "And when it's done, you never saw me and this conversation never happened." Richard was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with the last shreds of his conscience. But the image of $2 billion was stronger than any moral qualm. "When can you do it?" he asked. "Soon. Very soon. The child stays with her great-grandmother sometimes, right? Old neighborhoods, less security, easier access." "Yes, but nothing. You want this done or not?" Richard nodded slowly. "I want it done." "Good. I'll be in touch with details." "And Richard." The figure's voice turned threatening. "If you get cold feet, if you go to the police, if you betray me in any way, I'll tell everyone exactly what kind of man you really are." After the figure disappeared into the darkness, Richard stood alone in the park, shaking with a combination of fear and anticipation. He'd just arranged for his stepdaughter's murder and he felt nothing. Nothing except excitement about finally getting his hands on Simone's fortune. What Richard didn't know was that the entire conversation had been recorded by multiple hidden devices. The figure in the hoodie wasn't a hitman, it was Detective Harper, wearing a wire and backed up by half a dozen officers positioned throughout the park. But the most important witness to Richard's confession wasn't law enforcement. Hidden behind a maintenance shed 50 feet away, her small frame pressed against the cold metal, 8-year-old Destiny Carter Blackwell listened to her stepfather arrange her own death. Her notebook was clutched against her chest, and tears streamed silently down her face as she added this final damning scene to her collection of evidence. She'd followed him to the park against Grandma Ruby's specific instructions, worried that Richard was planning something terrible. Now she knew exactly how terrible and she knew exactly what she had to do about it. As Richard walked back to his car, already planning how he'd spend his inheritance, Destiny slipped through the darkness to where Detective Harper was removing his recording equipment. "I heard everything," she whispered, making the seasoned detective jump. "Destiny, what are you doing here? It's dangerous." "I know," she said simply. "But I needed to hear him say it. I needed to know for sure." She held up her notebook. "And now I can draw this too." Harper knelt down to her eye level, his heart breaking for this brave little girl who just heard her guardian plan her murder. "You shouldn't have been here, sweetheart. This was police business." "No," Destiny said with a maturity far beyond her 8 years. "This was my mama's business. And she would have wanted me to be brave and help catch the bad guy." As Harper called for backup to arrest Richard, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the treeline, a woman with tears streaming down her face and love blazing in her eyes as she watched her daughter stand up for justice with courage that would have made heroes proud. Tomorrow, Simone Carter Blackwell would rise from the dead. Tonight, she was simply a mother whose heart was breaking with pride. The courtroom was packed to capacity the next morning as news of Richard Blackwell's arrest spread through Atlanta's social circles like wildfire. The charges were staggering: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and theft of intellectual property. But the biggest shock was yet to come. Judge Patricia Brooks, a dignified woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, called the court to order just as the back doors opened. A murmur rippled through the crowd as a woman in an elegant black suit walked down the center aisle, her head held high, her steps confident and strong. Richard looked up from the defendant's table and his face went white as a sheet. Vanessa, sitting in the gallery, actually screamed. "Your Honor," the woman said in a voice that carried clearly through the stunned silence, "I am Simone Carter Blackwell and I am very much alive." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Judge Brooks had to bang her gavel repeatedly to restore order, but even she seemed shaken by the dramatic revelation. "Mrs. Carter Blackwell," Judge Brooks said carefully, "we were led to believe you had passed away." "There was a funeral?" "There was a funeral for an empty casket," Simone replied calmly. "With the help of Dr. Elena Rodriguez and Detective Harper, I staged my own death to gather evidence against the man who was slowly poisoning me to death." She turned to look directly at Richard, who sat frozen in his chair like a trapped animal. "Hello, husband. Surprised to see me?" Richard's lawyer immediately stood up, clearly flustered. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. If Mrs. Carter Blackwell is alive, then the charges of attempted murder are still valid," interrupted District Attorney Michelle Waters, a sharp-featured woman who'd been quietly building the prosecution's case. "Mr. Blackwell believed he was arranging for the murder of a child. His intent was clear, regardless of Mrs. Carter Blackwell's survival." Judge Brooks nodded slowly. "I'm inclined to agree. The charges stand as filed." From the gallery, Grandma Ruby watched with fierce satisfaction as her granddaughter took her rightful place among the living. Beside her, Destiny clutched her notebook of drawings, ready to tell her story to the world. Dr. Rodriguez sat in the witness section, her folder of medical evidence thick with proof of the systematic poisoning that had nearly killed Simone. Detective Harper reviewed his notes one final time, confident that justice was finally within reach. Sarah Mitchell, representing Simone's interests, stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, my client would like to make a statement about the crimes committed against her and her daughter." "Proceed, Mrs. Carter Blackwell." Simone stepped forward, her voice strong and clear as she faced the courtroom filled with people who'd mourned her death just weeks before. "For months, the man I trusted with my life was slowly killing me with poison. He convinced me to update my will, encouraged me to take out additional life insurance and planned to steal my company after I was dead. When that wasn't enough, when he discovered my daughter would inherit everything, he arranged for her murder too." Her voice broke slightly as she continued, "My 8-year-old daughter listened to her stepfather plan her own death. She had to live in a house with a man who saw her as nothing but an obstacle to be eliminated." The courtroom was dead silent now, hanging on every word. "But this story isn't just about betrayal and greed," Simone continued, her voice growing stronger. "It's about the power of family, the courage of a little girl who refused to be silenced, and the dedication of people who risk everything to see justice done." She looked directly at Destiny, who smiled back with tears in her eyes. "My daughter is the bravest person I know. And I'm alive today because she never stopped believing in the truth." As Simone returned to her seat, Richard finally found his voice. "You can't prove any of this," he shouted, standing up despite his lawyer's attempts to restrain him. "It's all lies. Manipulation." Judge Brooks fixed him with a steely stare. "Mr. Blackwell, we have recorded confessions, medical evidence, financial records, and eyewitness testimony. The only question now is whether you want to plead guilty and accept a plea agreement, or go to trial and face the maximum penalties." Richard's world crumbled around him as he realized that his perfect plan had become his perfect downfall. In the gallery, Vanessa quietly slipped out the back door, already planning her escape from the mess she'd helped create. But for Simone, standing in that courtroom very much alive and ready to fight for her family, this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the Carter Blackwell mansion. Soon to be just the Carter house again. Simone sat at her kitchen table, watching Destiny practice piano in the living room while Grandma Ruby prepared Sunday breakfast with the efficiency of a woman who'd been making magic happen in kitchens for 7 decades. The legal proceedings had wrapped up faster than anyone expected. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of life in prison without parole, Richard had accepted a plea agreement for 35 years in federal prison. Vanessa, charged as an accessory after the fact, received 5 years and immediate deportation back to her home country of Canada. "Mama," Destiny called from the piano bench, Do you think people will always remember that Daddy Richard was a bad man? Simone walked over and sat beside her daughter, smoothing her hair with gentle fingers. Baby girl, people will remember that justice was served. They'll remember that you were brave enough to tell the truth, even when it was scary. Are you sad about Daddy Richard? It was a question Simone had wrestled with for months. I'm sad about who I thought he was, she said honestly. I'm sad that he chose money over love. But I'm not sad that he can't hurt us anymore. Destiny nodded seriously, then brightened. I'm glad you came back from heaven to catch the bad guy. Simone laughed, the sound rich and joyful in a way it hadn't been for years. I was never in heaven, sweetheart. I was just hiding until it was safe to come home. Like a superhero. Exactly like a superhero. From the kitchen, Ruby called out, "Y'all come eat before this food gets cold." And Simone, Detective Harper called. He's stopping by later with some final paperwork. As they gathered around the table, 3 generations of Carter women who'd survived the worst and come out stronger, Simone felt a peace she hadn't known was possible. Soltech Innovations was thriving under her renewed leadership, with Sarah Mitchell as her trusted business partner and co-CEO. The insurance company had not only cleared Simone's name but had also paid out a substantial settlement for the emotional distress caused by their delayed investigation. That money, combined with Richard's forfeited assets, had been placed in a trust fund for Destiny's education and future. "Grandma Ruby," Destiny said as she buttered her biscuit, "tell me again about when you first knew Daddy Richard was lying." Ruby chuckled, her eyes twinkling with pride. "Baby girl, I knew something was wrong when that man shed more tears over spilled coffee than he did over your mama's death. A grandmother's intuition is never wrong." Dr. Rodriguez had become more than just their ally, she'd become family. Her courage in helping stage Simone's death had saved both their lives, and now she served as the family's personal physician and trusted friend. Detective Harper stopped by that afternoon, not with paperwork but with news that made them all smile. Richard tried to appeal his sentence, Harper announced as he accepted a glass of Ruby's famous sweet tea. Claimed he was entrapped, that the whole sting operation was illegal. And? Simone asked, though she could tell from his expression that she was going to like the answer. Federal appeals court threw it out in record time. Said, and I quote, "A man who arranges the murder of a child has forfeited any right to legal technicalities." Harper grinned. He'll serve every day of those 35 years. That evening, as Destiny got ready for bed in her own room in her own house, surrounded by pictures of her real family, she pulled out her notebook one last time. "What are you drawing now, baby?" Simone asked from the doorway. Destiny held up her latest creation. A picture of 3 women sitting around a breakfast table, all of them smiling, all of them safe. "I'm drawing our happy ending, Mama." Simone's eyes filled with tears as she tucked her daughter into bed. "You know what, sweetheart? I think this is just our happy beginning." As she turned off the lights and headed downstairs, Simone found Ruby sitting on the front porch, rocking gently in the swing that had been her perch for decades of family gatherings. "Come sit with me, grandbaby," Ruby said, patting the space beside her. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of their neighborhood, a place where families looked out for each other and children played safely in tree-lined streets. "You know what the most beautiful thing about all this is?" Ruby said finally. "What's that, Grandma?" "That child in there will grow up knowing that evil doesn't always win, that sometimes the good guys really do triumph, that women can be strong enough to rise from the dead and fight for their families." Ruby reached over and squeezed Simone's hand. "You gave her the greatest gift of all. You showed her that truth and courage will always defeat lies and greed." 3 months later, Simone stood before the Atlanta Business Council to accept an award for Entrepreneur of the Year. Her acceptance speech was brief but powerful. "They say you can't keep a good woman down. I'm living proof that's true. But more importantly, I'm proof that family, chosen and blood, can overcome any obstacle when we stand together." In the audience, Destiny beamed with pride, sitting between Grandma Ruby and Dr. Rodriguez. Sarah Mitchell filmed the speech on her phone, planning to add it to the company's website as inspiration for young entrepreneurs. As Simone concluded her remarks, she looked directly at her daughter. "To every little girl watching tonight, be brave enough to tell your truth. Be strong enough to stand up for what's right. And never, ever let anyone convince you that you're not worth fighting for." The applause was thunderous, but the smile on Destiny's face was worth more than any award. Later that night, as the family celebrated at home with takeout Chinese food and Destiny's favorite chocolate cake, Simone reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd lost a husband, but she'd gained something far more valuable. the unshakable knowledge that she and her daughter could survive anything together. "Mama," Destiny said as they cleaned up the kitchen, "when I grow up, I want to help catch bad guys like you did." "What kind of bad guys?" "The ones who hurt families. The ones who think children don't matter." Destiny's voice was serious, determined. "I want to make sure kids are safe." Simone knelt down to her daughter's eye level, seeing so much of herself in those wise brown eyes. "Then that's exactly what you'll do, baby girl. And I'll be right there cheering you on." As they turned off the lights and headed upstairs, Grandma Ruby called out from her room, "Y'all remember, tomorrow's a new day and we get to live it together. That's the best blessing of all." Simone tucked Destiny into bed one more time, kissed her forehead and whispered, "Sweet dreams, my brave girl. Tomorrow we get to keep building our happy story." And as the Carter house settled into peaceful sleep, protected by love and strengthened by truth, Simone knew that some endings were really just beautiful new beginnings in disguise.